My name is Sam Gold. I am an artist living in South Australia. My areas of interest are dealing with the body and art as a process, so using art making as a therapeutic model for healing, catharsis, and unraveling our experiences that we have in the world. So the process for Primavera started when I got to pitch an idea to Hannah, and I really had such an ambition to use and utilize the equipment that I had at my fingertips here at the Jan factory. There was this beautiful kiln. It's a gas kiln, and it's quite sustainable when it comes to firing this kiln because you have to pack it very tightly. It's a trolley kiln, so it opens up at the front and this massive trolley comes out, and you've got to get people on both sides to load massive shelves. So my shelves are about 6'10" by 6'10" millimeters in size. So I made my works fit to those dimensions. So when I started drafting out ideas, the height that I could work with was 1.3 meters in height and about 6'10" by 6'10" for each shelf. So I knew that that was my parameter. When I first started making works, I started with more of that traditional coral form that I'm known for. But for this work, I wanted to speak to endurance. So this work has a few kiln-formed cracks that came out, but I find them so delicious because they really speak to the fragility of the material and earth, and it's like location in space. So I liked that those kind of essences came through. To understand a clay body, I feel like you need to spend 6 to 8 months with it, seeing how it fires. So getting shrink rates, testing it. I would start out with small tests and then work to sizes that are about this big. And so by the time I got to 80 centimeters, which would be about here, I learned that the initial 14 to 15% shrink rate that would happen actually ended up being more like 30%. And that was kind of halfway through my making process where I learnt those things. There's one work in the show that's particularly quite tall and does look like a termite mound. And that one shrunk a whole 30 centimeters. You can't rely on absolutely everything coming out, no matter how thorough and rigorous you are with testing. All types of sizes and clay bodies, there will always be a little surprise. I've learned to embrace that because using fire as an alchemical process and becoming a little bit more familiar with the manual handling of a gas kiln made me appreciate that impact and those types of small little kiln-formed cracks that might happen in the work. And again, to go back to the fragility of the material, it ended up being something that I really cherished in the work. So I would make works in batches of 4, hoping that at least one came out. So there's also another law in ceramic law. It's that for every one piece that you need to make 3 more. If you would fire 3 and they all came out or 4, they all came out successful, then you would be able to work with those and have a bit of a selection from that. So I like to work in that grouping of things. So with lockdown, having time where I couldn't have access to my studio meant that I couldn't control drying, particularly when it did come to a stage where I had finished the majority of the work. So I had made a table of 6 works and they were all drying. And because I couldn't rotate that drying, take off the plastic, expose it for an hour, put it back on, have the windows open and control that, there were these really defined cracks. I start with a profile form and then I pinch out from that form this beginning flare. So that additional flare was quite thin, and it ended up being because of the lockdown, not being able to control it, the thin flares would crack off. So over maybe like a 2-month period after that, I was able to really slowly control all these terracotta works. And in, I think it was like 6 weeks, it took 6 weeks for them to dry evenly with that exposed, 1 hour lots of exposed to the elements. What I'm able to do with those works that weren't successful is actually reclaim the material, kind of ground that down, and then I'm going to add that to a porcelain body and refire that, so none of it goes to waste. So they're little areas that I can be sustainable in. So I first started thinking about these concepts in my training as an art therapist, and looking firsthand at a wide range of clients and students that I would support, and how their body would hold a velocity or a gentleness, and using clay because it's quite malleable. Your body is quite the profile. So when you're wheel throwing and centering, whatever, like however you're gesturing with your body, like if you've got like a slight scoliosis, or you're really leaning towards like the right, or your wrist is really bent out, the clay conforms to that and becomes a mirror to ourselves. So I feel all of that started this kind of thinking for me, and became kind of like this crux, like the core of what I'm researching and what I share with the world. I hope that people can walk away thinking about process and just our emotional processes, our experiences in the world, and using a material as a conversation to help reflect upon and build upon our own experiences.
My name is Samuel Leighton Dorr, and I'm an Australian self-taught ceramic artist, screenwriter and illustrator based on the Gold Coast. Recently I completed a large-scale interactive ceramic work called Cloud Drive, which invited members of the public to submit anonymous thoughts and feelings online. These messages were then housed through AR technology in hundreds of ceramic clouds, mounted at different lengths to a 6-metre wall at the new Hodder Gallery on the Gold Coast. It was so rewarding to see people, young people and old people, download my purpose-built app and watch their faces light up as they move between the clouds. No two messages the same, connecting with strangers in unexpected ways through the art of ceramics. As an artist, I love to explore the intersection of ceramics and technology, ceramics and animation, ceramics and storytelling, ceramics as a tool for self-expression and therapy. I work from my living room with a slab roller in my kitchen and a microwave-sized kiln on my balcony. And while the lived-in nature of my practice isn't necessarily comfortable or glamorous, it has meant that ceramics has become my way of moving through the world. When I've struggled to find the words, ceramics has helped me understand myself, as well as empowered me to bring beauty to themes of vulnerability, mental illness, and queerness, as well as my experiences with chronic pain and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I think at the end of the day, it's the limitless nature of ceramics, the way it marries curiosity with tradition, the way it's community-centered in nature that makes it such a magical medium. I've only really been practicing for a few years so far, but I can't wait to continue experimenting, learning, connecting, and slowly finding my way through clay.
sitting at Hutton Vale today, this is actually my work kitchen, and we are a mixed farm, and we do a number of value-adding things as well, with a small range of chutneys and wine, and we do lamb for the farmers market and a number of restaurants. Hutton Vale has been part of the Angus family for a long time. In 1843 it was first settled. I've obviously been a little bit tending towards the creative side in things as well, not only in the business but in the way we present things and what we do in the buildings and things in the paddock. There's been a chance for me to actually exercise my passions as well, which I'm very grateful for.
I was lucky to come into Hutton Vale and help Jan out in the kitchen making some passata. But it also gave me a good opportunity to actually, you know, discuss with Jan her passions and how the farm came about. I wandered off and started to have a look around, and it was a minefield of I don't want to say stuff, but it was a minefield of hundreds of years of history just laying around.
In the form of stuff.
In the form of stuff. Yeah, it's been an amazing process just going through and then just trying to tie Jan into into these things that I've found on the farm. You know, like experimenting mould making, and I'm still doing still hoping to do some wheel throwing in there as well, but still working with the beautiful porcelain and how the porcelain interacts with the textures throughout the farm and how I bring those textures to the porcelain forms. So it's been an amazing journey.
Well, I'm pleased that you find it complex like I find it complex. I wouldn't like you to get away with an easy journey, because there are all these things going on all the time, and a lot of that accumulation is just stuff, and then a lot actually fits in somewhere, and it's got a story to tell. Even though it's not used today, it's still part of the journey we've been on. Something
that would be normally sort of superfluous sitting in your barn, and you know, and I can transform it into something quite beautiful, like exactly what you've done, and you know, and getting people to engage in that is really quite exciting.
Yeah. Well, I find it very exciting to watch you at work. I don't have the time to make things that are just there. They have to have a purpose to it, and I think that frugality is about reinventing, recycling, not wasting, have a light footprint on the earth that we're on, and it all comes into the philosophy of how we try to run our farm as well.
Yeah, so this is the original insulator, which is made of glass, and that one was a resin mould, and giving it that new life.
I just have always loved the shape of those jars, so I've kept quite a few of them.
Yeah, and you do see them throughout the farm, and you put candles in them, and you wide up these contraptions.
I've done all sorts of things with them. They're just such a nice jar.
Yeah.
I loved it when you chose those.
My signature within my arts practice is doing a lot of mark making on them, so I think that's going to be my next task, is to go in and just see what things I can find to use to mark make into the objects as well.
I can't get over how she picks up things that actually do mean something to me in their form or their shape. I think it's so important that we have collaborations like this. One of my long-term journeys is for people to understand that the business in arts and the arts in business, and it doesn't matter what business you're in, and it doesn't matter whether it's from a letterhead or to an exchange that's as intimate really as what we're doing in this exchange. It needs far more exposure for everybody's point of view, and while it's work for an artist, it's also growth, as you've really talked about today, but it's also an understanding that these worlds aren't separated, and Australia, I think, is getting over that hurdle, and we've got some really amazing examples and success stories, but our culture and our arts needs to be completely entwined from the grassroots level.
I probably am most known, if I'm known for anything these days, to being the creator of a sort of a style of pottery that is very much about the marriage of decoration onto the form. I'm someone who really enjoys the hand processes of painting, and this includes hand painting onto pottery, which is not that fashionable these days. It's a little bit seen as being possibly old generation or something again associated with your grandparents, possibly because it was done badly industrially, and that gave everyone a bit of a sour taste of what decoration on pottery could be about. So there's that aspect of it. But in my work, I love the hand skills of painting, and hand skills of painting on clay are very particular. And if I'm going to be doing that painting, I need to paint something. And luckily, I'm interested in a lot of historical sources. So I draw my imagery from a very, very rich legacy of traditional approaches, which can be little bands of decoration, borders of decoration, and particularly obviously the blue willow imagery. I expand that with natural history sources, sources from scientific illustration, from fashion and fabric, textiles, from, in the case of this little piece that I'm working on right here at the moment, I'm drawing this from 18th century lacquered wood decoration, pen and ink done on wood and then French polished. I want people to be able to live with these pieces, to use them, to enjoy them. That's why I make things as humble as small cups and teapot. Things that are utility, that actually people can use, handle, touch, use to taste food, ingest, and also use as rituals in their lives. I also make things which you would not say are useful. They're more one-off kind of pieces, they're often large in scale, and they, in a way, are extending the dialogue about utility and function. And there's a big cup and saucer which people will see in the show, and when they look more closely at that, they'll see that it's sort of an essay about Adelaide. The whole surface of it is filled with a sort of a fantasy wander through Adelaide. The parklands become almost a blue willow world. The buildings like at the back of the museum and the chambers off the side of the town hall are all featured on there. The jam factory itself is featured in there, and as are the rainwater tanks. People would recognise references to Alice in Wonderland in that work, because that's another text that for me as a child was wonderful, a voyage of exploration. In this case with a heroine, it's very easy to dismiss all this kind of macho bravado of being an explorer as a male domination, but Alice in Wonderland is a fantastic example of the exploration of a psychotropic zone, a mental world, of absurdity perhaps, but also of just the power of a heroine who can go into that world and encounter it. So Alice herself and the characters out of the Lewis Carroll book feature strongly in a lot of my work, whether it's the dodo, which is a wonderfully complex metaphor for something that was literally devoured by humankind, driven to extinction. If ever there's a cautionary tale, the dodo is a good example of it. Well, as I hope people can see once they look at a piece like Blue-Roo, which is in this exhibition, is that here you've got a very classic picture of a kangaroo. It is based on the painting by George Stubbs, which was painted shortly after the voyage of exploration Cook's voyage got back to England, and of course Joseph Banks, who was on that voyage, he commissioned Stubbs, who was the preeminent animal illustrator, to paint a picture of the kangaroo, this new animal, which was an incredible sort of revelation. Stubbs had to work from a few sort of desiccated, dried out specimens which had travelled back from Australia in the hold of the Endeavour. When Cook was sailing up the east coast of Australia, he discovered or ran into literally the Great Barrier Reef. They had to run it up onto the beach, and they lost a lot of specimens because the hold was flooded. And while they were holed up at the Endeavour River, they had to try and replace some of the lost things. So the kangaroo actually comes from that point of contact. It'd be great to see that in Australia, because it is one of the first depictions of the kangaroo. And it really became the image of the kangaroo. It was like what an F.J. Holden was. That's what a Holden looked like for many, many years. And Stubbs's kangaroo is what a kangaroo looked like for many, many years. Even when there were more specimens, and indeed live ones, actually in England, people still reproduced Stubbs's kangaroo. People could come and admire these things in print rooms and look at them, and Stubbs's kangaroo, with this wonderful sort of over-the-shoulder, on-regardant pose where it's sitting up in the landscape. And anyone who looks at the original print of that would see closely that there's Xanthorrhea, and there's a real attempt to set it in a authentic landscape, even though it's fanciful. It's a reconstruction from a few literal bare bones, conjured up into life by Stubbs and then reproduced, reflected. People looking at my plate will see quite clearly that it is my attempt to replicate again the impact of the copper plate, because the copper plate was a definite line. It was an etched, drawn line. It was as if the world was being measured. Not for the first time, but certainly measured by these people very carefully. In the background, if you look through that sort of filter of measurement that was being applied to the natural world, in this case the kangaroo, you will see a fragment of blue willow pattern. Blue willow, of course, was originally based on ideas and images about the Orient, about the exotic East, which is actually where Australia is. I've used blue willow a lot throughout my work because it represents a projection of what might have been or what might be about the land of the other, the faraway place that exists on the horizon. And the willow plate itself is often depicted as a harbour. In the plate Blue Roo, I hope you can sort of see a sort of an overlay, a bringing together conjunction of the sort of possibilities of the imagination echoed in the background of the blue willow, overlay with the fact of nature, with the apprehension, with the encounter of the natural world.
The legendary activist and actor Uncle Jack Charles has been incarcerated no less than 22 times. And it was while doing hard time that Uncle Jack became a pottery teacher. I visited Uncle Jack to learn about how this meditative art form helped him and others find some peace and purpose in prison.
Let's get our hands dirty.
Great.
Yes, let's play mud pies. Big kids playing in the mud. Wet your hands, okay? And then throw some water over the Hamburglar here, okay?
Yep, the Hamburglar. Hey, so Uncle, most people would know you as an actor rather than a potter. Tell me, when did pottery enter your life?
It came in Castlemaine Jail in the 70s when I was doing time there. So it was a little section of the woodworking shop was set aside for my pottery shop. I had it open from 8 to 8 of the night, 7 days a week. My pottery shop was called Psycho-Ceramica because you had to be a crackpot to be in the nick in the first place, you know. And Psycho-Ceramica was successful. I calmed many a savage beast. Teaching them pottery, you had to relax, you had to have some deep inner perspective. The governors in the prisons realised that I was doing something unique here. I was providing a place of sanctuary in a maddening world. It was a successful program down there. They kept coming back, and especially after working hours and on the weekends and holidays, they kept coming back to the pottery shop to make box loads of crockery to be able to take back to their visitors to take home. So some guys, especially the Yugoslavians and that, they made whole sets of crockery.
How can I not get this very simple thing right,
Well,
Uncle?
because your nails are big, and you might be a little bit iffy about that.
Yeah.
You've got to wrap your fingers around, and those fingers have got to do some little subtle pressure.
My big Melanesian hands don't know how to do subtle pressure. Look at
Many potters don't have long fingernails
Yeah.
because...
You know, I thought I'll give myself a mani so we can look good for
yeah.
pottery,
Yeah.
and I've just shot myself in the foot with
Yeah, you thought your hands would look sexy on the wheel, eh?
See, that's what I was
Yes,
thinking,
yes, yes.
Uncle.
I was actually shanghaied from Castlemaine Jail down to Wadron, open camp down near Yarram, to develop a pottery shop there. And it was the best years of my time in prisons. 5 years teaching the seemingly flotsam jetsam of society.
So it's a matter of making a cylinder first. Look, even I make mistakes. I went too thin with that one. All right? So... How you doing?
I don't know.
Well, slow it down a
Slow it
little
down?
bit. Yeah, slow
Yep.
it down.
I have no idea what I'm doing here, Uncle, but let's give it a shot, eh? Thanks, Jane. Uncle's like, no, she's not.
It's a wonderful ashtray. Yeah, I take pleasure in working with clay because in no time at all I found, especially in the nick, that the hours went by ever so quickly.
Yeah.
Suddenly it was muster time, dinner time. There's nothing like completing something, making a casserole dish with a lid, or a teapot, or even a simple mug. I've gotten over being overly critical of the work that I do on the wheel and accept it. Okay, now there's a hole in it. See, look, you can see right through it. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, but Uncle, I can see why this would be so appealing. There's almost something meditative about just sitting here and
time flies.
shaping. Yeah,
And in jail, you want time to fly.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Hello, Sawadee Krab. My name is Vipu Sivilasa. I am a Thai-born Australian artist. I mainly work with ceramic, making sculptures. Last year, I had an exhibition planned, but it was cancelled because of COVID. In a way, it gave me an opportunity to come up with a new idea. So I created a project called Wellness Deities.
The Wellness Deity project started with an invitation to members of the public to submit drawings of their own personal COVID superhero or deity, basically a figment of their imagination that could offer them a kind of spiritual protection during this period of COVID-related angst. Vipu then selected the drawings he felt a connection with and used them as inspiration to make these porcelain sculptures, currently on display at Linden New Art in Naarm, Melbourne. To get a first-hand insight into the project, Vipu actually invited me to submit my own drawing, which I have to say both excited and terrified me. Hi everyone, I'm at home during lockdown, so I should say two things. I've actually got my 9-year-old who is filming. I've got my 7-year-old who's going to help me out with doing my drawing of a deity.
I'm not help you with anything.
It's actually an escaped tiger in the burbs. But yes, we are going to do a picture for Vipu of an imaginary deity, so I will check in with you soon.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I've got a delivery for you.
Matching with your earrings.
Look, I like to think about these things.
Yes,
let's make it happen.
So good. Okay, I'm just about to start. But can you tell me about this really cool guy?
Oh my gosh. Okay, this guy. During lockdown, I started thinking about my other homeland, which is Rabaul, Papua New Guinea.
Right.
So Rabaul is known as the land of volcanoes. We have what are called tubuans that are our deities. So I kind of adapted the tubuan eyes on this fella here, made him into a bird of paradise, which is our national symbol. And gave him a golden afro because that's our thing back in Rabaul.
The gold afro?
Yes,
golden
absolutely.
Afro?
That's
Man,
right.
I got to go there. I want to see it.
Totally.
It sounds so cool.
It's so beautiful. So how are you going to take what's on this page and turn it into something?
First, I look at the picture, and then second, I read the story that you write, and then I think about how is it relate to me, what experience that I kind of connect to your story, and then slowly the idea and the desire of the piece come to my head, and then translate through my hands and go to the clay. This is going to be a really fun project. The person who made this is really colorful, and I think she has like open mind because the eye is really, really big. And actually a really strong person because of the fire. Actually, I'm turning into a fortune teller now. It's not supposed to be now.
Great. Tell me what's happening in the next 10 years.
That's not what I do for my artwork. Sorry. What I feel is you're talking about to home. That's the hit me directly because when you say like you miss home, you want to go home, I can connect to that. You know, like home in Australia and home for me in Thailand.
So what role have deities played in your own experience and upbringing?
Born in Thailand, we have a lot of deity, like house spirit. And I grew up with the idea of like each house has its own spirit. So we have to be nice to the spirit to be able to live nicely and not doing wrong things so you get like bad luck. And deity for me it's a way for people to get comfort without paying psychologists. So by talking to deity or praying or asking for things, it just feels better by saying it. And that's come to this project because I think by asking people to do something or talk about it, it will hopefully help them feel better. So I just make kind of like 2 pinch pots. One is bigger and one is smaller. Okay. And I put it together like this to form a head.
Do you know what I really love? Your works are clearly very delicate. There's fragility that's within them, but there's also humour, which is not something that you normally associate with wellness. Tell me about that relationship.
Humor is an easy access for people to get to connect with my work. I feel like there is so many not so nice things around me, around the world already, so I just want to make something that fun and cheerful and make people happy. Once they connect with my pieces, then they might see a serious message that I have in the work.
So is it a mental health process in some ways too?
I think you could say that, yeah. Because of so many bad things, people want to somehow connect spiritual with something nice, something good, something that feeling better. So art is one thing that provides that. And I didn't realize how important art is before. I just like, I'm just doing my own thing. But COVID actually tell me that.
Is it nerve-wracking having people watch?
It's just 3 people. Normally I do like in front of 10,000 people. The Queen, the King of Sweden come and watch me work. So this is nothing.
I love where this is at, Vipul, and I can see where it's going to be going. So what needs to happen now?
So now I will let it sit for a while, so the clay kind of stiffening, and then when it's stiff, it allows me to add more element to the piece. I won't tell you what it is because I want it to be a surprise for you.
Well, we'll leave it here for today, but I cannot wait until you come into the studio with the finished product. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I look forward to see your outfit when I visit you.
It's going to be something floral, I think.
Yes.
And we have the man himself in the studio to show me the finished work. Hello again, Vipul.
Hello, Namila.
Now, this is the moment of truth, the big revelation.
So you ready for it?
I'm ready. Let's see. Let's find out.
Ta-da!
What? Oh my goodness, let me have a look at this.
Yeah. Please take it close to you.
Oh my gosh. This looks amazing. Okay. So talk me through that day in the studio. You were making the feet.
So after you left my studio, I add wings and then I add like afro kind of.
Yes, I see the golden halo there, the golden afro.
Yes, I need to have that. And then I file the first time, and then I file the second time. It come out like only white color, and then I start painting it. So you just pick up the color pigment, mix with the painting mediums, mix really, really well, and then slowly paint it. From your drawing, we have the green and the browns, also the patterns and the story, like talking about like 2 homes. So that's you got 2 house equals importance, so like to hand balancing your life. Also the fire from the volcanoes on the base. And I also add an element of my work, which is flowers all around the piece.
So I've got one more awkward question for you because, I'm not going to let you run away without acquiring at least one of your works. Can I keep this for a little bit, just even for the season of the show?
Yes, but
Okay.
only one condition.
What?
You have to wear this.
Hey, come on.
So remember when you come to my studio and you're wearing those beautiful color earrings you made? So I made some for you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, here you go.
Yes. Look
And
at
sparklings. And I think it fits your personality really, really well.
Vipul, and I've got the perfect neck bling to go with this as well.
Here you go.
So look out for them in an upcoming episode for sure. And also the statue will take pride of place on our set. I love what we have created together, even though it was purely your labour.
It's collaborative.
Yes, we'll run with that. We'll run with that. I've loved meeting you, Vipul. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
My name is Yasmin Smith and I'm an artist from Sydney. I am a ceramicist mainly, but I concentrate my work on using ceramic glazes as evidence of, I suppose, chemical narratives that exist in particular sites. The process that I undertake is to go to a particular site of interest, explore the ecology and the geology and the human history of that site, and then I collect plant specimens from which I will make ceramic replicas in usually stoneware clay. The next step of the process is that I will then burn those branches down, the original specimens, down to ash, and take that ash to create a ceramic glaze that furnishes the outside of the replicas of those ceramic branches. There's a variety of different colours that you'll get in the glaze, and that's because the ashes of the plants retain inorganic elements that they collect from the soils. So, for example, if a tree is growing in the central desert of Australia, it's taking in a lot of iron oxide from the very rich red soils there. Compared to, say, plant that have been growing in the Paris Basin, which has taken in a lot of calcium, which is one of the, the geological elements of the Paris Basin. So the work is titled Seine River Basin. The form is 44 ceramic tree branches that have been cast from plant specimens that I had collected while I was on residency in Paris for 5 months. I've made one cast of 22 different types of shapes of branches, and then I've recast those 22 branches again, but flipped them over as if to sort of give the audience the impression of the reflection of trees on a body of water. I'd been invited to participate in an exhibition platform called Cosmopolis, which was put together by Catherine Weir at the Centre Pompidou. And she'd invited me to China, where I did a 2-month residency at the end of 2018 for Cosmopolis 1.5, and then to Paris for Cosmopolis 2, Rethinking the Human. My intention, a very broad intention of the project, was to collect wood from the river systems of the Seine River Basin and the riparian ecology, so that's the riverbank ecology. One of the ecologists that had replied to me, we ended up meeting and collaborating, and he took me on a tour of the River Seine from its spring in near Dijon in Burgundy back to Paris. When I did get to Paris and I found my way into different kind of collaborative relationships with people, this just organically led to the selection of locations where I would find wood. So, for example, Jean-Francois Asmodee, who was the ecologist that I work with, he had a connection with an NGO that cleaned the River Marne. So that was my first port of call to look for some wood. And it was this group that provided me with a section that became the Marne willow tree glaze and forms. So once I'd found the willow from the Marne, I thought, okay, I'll try and find some more willow trees. And through the help of these new friends and relationships that I'd formed, we ended up finding an arborist who had cut down a willow tree from the River Seine, right at the confluence of the River Yonne and the River Seine. At the Yonne, which is a bit outside, a bit upstream of the sort of main hub of Paris, I'd collected willow from the banks of the river that had been cut down and had been left by the side of the river in a 60-metre long by 5-metre tall pile of wood. I also collected driftwood that had collected at the Écluse, at the beginning of the lock of the river. The fourth site was actually the St. Denis Canal, which is sort of to the northeast of Paris city. It's probably the location of like the most densely populated with human habitation. In terms of its pristineness, it's probably the least pristine of all the locations. One of the aspects of the research is not only to look at geology and plant biology, but also to look at human history. So if there's been any activities that have happened at that site, whether that's mining or heavy agriculture or just mass habitation, sometimes humans can leave a chemical trace behind. And quite often, the trees that grow in those areas show, evidence of that. And that evidence comes through in this aesthetic glaze representation. For example, a tree that I did in the flooded forests of Tasmania was a celery top pine, and it came out with more of a purple glaze. And purple is indicative of manganese dioxide. So I got the ashes tested, and that's something that I also do with every project, is to get the ash tested at a lab for its metal content. And in that particular case, it showed that that plant had more manganese dioxide in it compared to iron, for example, which usually iron dominates because it's so ubiquitous in the soils. So I did a little bit of research on manganese dioxide, toxicities around that area, and there was quite a lot of information gathered since around about 2009 in those local towns where there was high levels of manganese dioxide in the lakes and the groundwater due to runoff from local mine tailings, for example. This is an example of a mould that I would make of a branch. So this is how it comes in two parts. Once you finish the two halves of the mould, you then remove the original piece and put back the two halves back together. And then I just strap them up. And so this is the front of the mould and the top of the mould, and it's actually got a hole, which it's called, I suppose, the funnel, where we'll pour the liquid clay into in order for it to set inside in the shape of the internals. And this is the slip. Slip is basically liquid clay, so it's clay that's got a deflocculant in it that keeps it suspended, keeps all the clay particles suspended in a liquid. And that just gets poured straight in the top. And you have to have these tight so that it doesn't explode and clay go everywhere. Oh! And so what'll happen is the plaster itself is quite thirsty for water. So it starts to draw the water that's contained in the clay slurry out of what you've just poured inside. And that you'll start to see a small film start to gather, and the level of the slip will drop. And so over maybe about a half an hour period, I just keep topping it up until I'm happy with the thickness that has formed on the drier part of the pour. And basically then I just tip that straight back out and leave it for maybe a day until it gets leather hard and I can open up the mould and take the piece out. This is a triaxial blend, and this is the way that I test the ash for the glazes for my work. So the recipe that I choose is somewhere in the middle, and I use that same recipe from every project to the next, so it really never changes, and that way each glaze from one project is comparable to the next one. This is an example of the glaze when it's mixed with water. So in here is the ash along with the two other glaze materials, and I just take that mixture and literally paint it on the outside of the bisque-fired clay, and so when it goes on it looks grey, but then when it comes out, once it goes through the firing process, and all of the glaze melts, that melting helps to show the colours of the metal oxides that were actually inside there. When the ash, when I collect the ash, I basically burn it in a non-contaminated environment, so an environment where there's, you know, no rusty bits of metal or anything like that. And I will burn it slowly, because if you burn too quickly, you burn away the ash. So I'll burn it over a week or something like that. And then I sieve it I sieve the ash in a spaghetti strainer to get rid of any of the big bits. And then that's it. That's what I basically mix water with for the glaze. There's 61 elements on the periodic table that will have an effect on glazes or ceramic processes. But what the glazes tend to respond most to in terms of chemicals is metals that produce colour. So the work, Seine River Basin, has this light yellow colour throughout the whole work. And this is reflective of a very light iron content in the soil. It also has a very matte finish, and that could be due to the extremely high levels of calcium that are found across all 4 sites, across all 4 glazes and trees that have grown there. And that calcium is really a very old geological formation. So that's why I get this kind of laboratory breakdown. So I actually get 52 elements tested. What this shows me is a sort of a numerical ordering of the amount of metals that are found in each ash. And so from that, I can go back to the glaze aesthetic and draw a sort of comparative narrative between what this empirical evidence says and what is also in some ways empirical, but interpretive and speculative evidence from the glaze. Some of the main differences that I found, or interesting differences that I found, was the amount of strontium that was in the Marne and the St. Denis Canal woods, which are closer to the city. There's potential that in areas where there was more habitation, that the strontium might be present because of that sort of human activity or input. There's a couple of other really cool examples of that happening with some of my other works. This is actually a pear ash from Shepperton in Victoria, and you can see that it's gone this kind of reddy purpley colour. Well, this is the pear ash in reduction. So again, this is where the flame of firing the kiln is starved of oxygen, and it starts to eat the oxygen out of the, in this case, copper that was in the ash of the pear tree. So when it was fired in oxidation, it was this copper green, and when it was fired in reduction, you got this copper red, and this shows pretty well that example there. That was an interesting story, because when I got the glaze results back from that work, and I thought it looked like a copper green, I went and I asked the farmers why there'd be more copper in that glaze, in that tree, and he told me that until about the 1970s, they used to spray this tree with copper oxide to make the fruit go brown, and they stopped it in the 70s, but that orchard was actually 150 years old. So it was subjected to, almost 100 years of being sprayed directly with copper oxide, and that was just retained in the wood. Yeah, making work on a residency like Seine River Basin, in Paris for 5 months, it's quite a difficult experience at first. It's not easy, but you have to be quite open to the world and not too precious about what you thought you might be doing, and let the work or the research evolve depending on what becomes available to you. I think I was speaking about this before. It's more like a collaboration with the world than it is trying to force your entire, push the world into the box that you want to see it through. A lot of the time I spent in Paris was trying really hard to find materials, to find collaborations and spaces to work, and then a lot of luck, I think, by putting myself out there, by being open to new relationships and situations, that sort of opened up more opportunities, for the work to evolve and to be produced. And you come across major difficulties, kilns breaking down, having to rely on people you don't know that well is often difficult. But I think in those tough situations, you tend to actually form quite enduring and special relationships with people, yeah.